Oh, dual wield. This guy's ready. Wow, he's been in Asmongold for a long time, I guess. Okay. Thunderfury. Blessed Blade of the Windseeker. Did anybody say it?
Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video for you.
Okay.
Some people liked my latest video about Quilsarar, so I thought it might be fun to start a whole series about some of the more iconic weapons in the Warcraft universe.
I actually need to watch the video about Quilsarar, just so I know what to do. Because I actually have no idea how to get Quilsarar. I know it has something to do with a compendium of dragon slaying or something like that. Thor's compendium of dragon slaying. I have no idea how to get it though.
I'm calling it the Azeroth Arsenal, and what better way to start it with none other than Thunderfury, the Blessed Blade of the Windseeker.
There it is, dude.
Being one of the first legendaries released back in vanilla, is quite possibly one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic weapon in the entire game.
I'd say it probably
to get it
is.
back then, you needed three things: luck, 39 friends, and a lot of gold. But before we get into how to actually obtain it, we should first talk about the history and lore behind the weapon to get a good understanding of why it's epic. Or legendary, I guess.
Yes.
I'll give a very abridged retelling. Simply put, it's the weapon of the former prince of all wind elementals, Thunderon.
That fucking asshole.
A very long time ago, before the time of man, Azeroth was a stage of an all-out war between the four elemental lords. Ragnaros the Fire Lord, Alakir the Wind Lord, Neptulon the Tide Hunter, and Therazane the Stone Mother.
Oh, jeez.
Their itinerary was basically to keep Azeroth in a perpetual state of chaos and destruction. Why? Well, why not? Actually, it was because there was a fifth element, Spirit, that was being consumed by the world soul, Azeroth.
What the fuck?
This sent everything off balance, and as a result, the remaining elementals became quite violent. It's sort of like Captain Planet, with Spirit as heart. So, these elemental lords were at constant war with one another, and were free to do as they pleased until the old gods arrived. Being far more powerful.
I remember like the villain in Captain Planet was like really hot, right? It was like this girl. That's like literally the only thing that I remember about Captain Planet at all. That's the only thing. And it was meh. Yeah, that's Power Rangers? I don't remember, man. I remember I was like, damn, she's hot. And that was the only thing I remember about the entire fucking thing.
The elemental lords allied together in light of a common enemy, but it wasn't enough.
Okay.
They were defeated and were swiftly enslaved by the old gods and became tools to be used.
Wow.
The Pantheon would eventually arrive and defeat the old gods and put the elemental lords in timeout basically, and imprison them in their own elemental planes. The Firelands for Ragnaros and all of the fire elementals, Deepholm for Therazane and her earth elementals.
Holy shit.
Skywall for Alakir and his winds, and the Abyssal Maw for Neptulon and his waters.
I guess I never really put all this together.
No longer having that common enemy, the elemental lords continued their war with each other, and a battle called the Elemental Sundering took place.
Okay.
It was a 5,000-year war between two main belligerents, Ragnaros and Alakir.
I killed both of them. I had both their mounts.
Ragnaros wasn't playing fair, though. He had his two lieutenants, Baron Geddon and Gar, deceive and betray the prince of the air elementals.
Damn, dude, Baron Geddon works out.
They lured him into a trap where he was struck down by Ragnaros, the prince of the air elementals. Elemental Sundering took place.
Sorry, I'll read that.
It was a 5,000-year war between two main belligerents, Ragnaros and Alakir. Okay. Ragnaros wasn't playing fair, though. He had his two lieutenants, Baron Geddon and Gar, deceive and betray the prince of the air elementals.
That's why they have the bindings.
They lured him into a trap where he was struck down by Ragnaros and his weapon, Sulfuras. We'll talk about that one in another episode.
That's why they have the bindings.
Ragnaros consumed much of Thunderon's essence and became far more powerful, but he saved some for later.
Wow!
He stored what little remained of Thunderon's essence in two special artifacts, the bindings of the Windseeker. These were placed in the hands of his trusted lieutenants, Gar and Geddon, where they would patrol the caverns of the Molten Core to protect Ragnaros during his slumber. So, these two bindings, although it's just a small portion of his essence, hold incredible power and would be key in creating a weapon capable of harnessing the fallen prince's power. Which brings us to the events of World of Warcraft. The first two raids in the game were Onyxia's Lair and the Molten Core,
dude, this is
the dawn of raiding the World of Warcraft. That's right, no longer were you with 4 others strolling through a dungeon. You were with 39 other people working together to make it through this ultimate challenge.
You can tell for sure this is a vanilla screenshot, not a classic screenshot, because there's a Moonkin in the picture. Like this would never happen in Classic WoW. This would never happen. And there's also 5 other druids. There's no reason for that.
Point in the game, even epic items were very rare.
Yep.
So not just an epic, but rather a legendary was, well, legendary.
Massive.
They required a lot of luck and dedication, and only a very small percentage of the player base would ever get them. Even to this day, 13 years later, Thunderfury is still only held by a small percentage of the player base.
I love seeing them drop.
So, how did you get it? Well, Geddon and Gar were both bosses in the Molten Core, which held a whopping 10 bosses total, ending with Ragnaros himself.
That was 9.
There were different orders in which you could defeat the bosses, but they were generally the 4th and 6th bosses respectively in the raid that people killed.
Generally.
So, fairly deep within the area. They were quite difficult during the time, mainly because, like I said, this was one of the first raids. People, for the most part, had no idea what they were doing, and it was chaos. But eventually, people started getting the hang of things and were able to take them down. They dropped several epic purple items as a reward, and a very, very small chance to drop a binding of the Windseeker, the artifact Ragnaros had entrusted to them long ago.
Oh man.
Baron Geddon dropped the left binding,
That's
and
so
Gar
badass.
dropped the right binding. The flavor text reads, the left and right halves of Thunderon's eternal prison. One player needed to get both of these to be able to start the process to obtaining Thunderfury. Another thing I should say is that this was also back when people used Dragon Killing Points, or DKP for short. Like I said, with 40 people in one raid, it was chaos, and this point system was a way to try and have an orderly way of distributing items to all 40 of these players.
That's unfortunately what people that have to do, if they don't have somebody who's as ethical and fair as I am in terms of distributing loot. You know, like obviously you have to do that, like if you don't really have somebody that really knows what they're doing.
You would earn these points by killing bosses, and then spend them on items. And with Thunderfury being equipable by every class who could hold a sword, there was a lot of competition. If your guild was...
It's actually not true. You couldn't use it if you were a mage. Mages can use one-handed swords. Slight inaccuracy in this video. The restrictions were relaxed later on, as far as I know. Lock too.
Smart though, they would limit it preferably to warrior tanks and maybe DPS rogues since they got the most use out of it. But like I said, no one knew what they were doing back then, so even hunters would get it in some cases. So you would raid the Molten Core weekly, hope and pray that the bindings drop, and hope and pray that you have more DKP than everyone else. If you managed to get both bindings, you went to the high-level Silithus zone and talked to an NPC named the High Lord Demetrian.
I remember, like, I don't know any guild that did Thunderfury with DKP. I don't know any guild that did that back in the day. Or Warglaive. Oh, actually, no. That's actually not true. We did Warglaives with DKP. Yes, we did actually do Warglaives with DKP. But the way that we did it was that if you got the first Warglaive, you automatically got the second one. So you're basically bidding DKP for both Warglaives, not just one.
He asks you to examine a Vessel of Rebirth, which would later be used to summon the Elemental Lord, Prince Thunderon, once more. If you brought the right materials, that is. To do this, you needed 4 things. The left binding, the right binding, the essence of the Fire Lord, which is dropped by Ragnaros, the final boss of the Molten Core, and 10 legendary enchanted Elementium bars.
You can only get those in BWL,
So, we have the bindings covered pretty thoroughly. As for the essence of the Fire Lord, though, this was quite hard to obtain as you would imagine. Ragnaros, being the final boss, was appropriately the hardest out of any of the encounters in the raid, and your guild needed to be on top of their game to take him down.
Do you want me to say something that's like really kind of unpopular? I actually think that Gar is probably harder than Ragnaros. I think Gar is harder. Gar is unironically the hardest fight in Molten Core. I'm not even kidding. Like, Gar is actually... Major Domo? No, you just CC all of the mobs and then kill the melee ones. You can AoE them down. Like, and like, PvP takes no skill. Well, it's Gar, it requires more coordination. Ragnaros, you just sit there and hit him until he's dead. Right? I mean, that's it. I mean, I guess Ragnaros is hard for tanks. Like, that's true. But Gar is hard for tanks, too. So it's hard for me to say. 6-8 Warlocks and Gar, GG. Yeah, that's true, too.
You couldn't skip right to him either. You had to kill all 9 other bosses and extinguish the ruins near them before you unlocked the NPC that summoned Ragnaros. Luckily though, the essence was a 100% drop rate, so there was no luck involved there, just skill. Remember earlier when I said that one of the 3 things you needed was a lot of gold?
This is the
that's where
Elementium
these
bars.
enchanted Elementium bars
This is
came
it.
into play. To make these, you needed 3 Elementium Flux, which you could buy from vendors at 3 gold each.
Yep.
So 30 total, which was 90 raw gold. That was nothing to sneeze at back then. But we're just getting started. You also needed the rare Fiery Core reagent, so 10 total for 10 bars. These dropped from the Molten Core.
That's not a big deal. Like, the fiery cores are not a big deal. I think, honestly, like, that's not a big deal. The only hard part about it was the Elementium. Everything else was a joke. Even the Arcanite bars were a joke. Imagine thinking that you're going to get a Legendary and being held back by a couple of 25 gold bars. Not going to happen.
And if your guild was nice, they'd usually supply
Not
you
going to
with
fucking
this.
happen.
Otherwise, you'd have to buy them off of the auction house. You also needed 10 Arcanite bars for each enchanted bar, so 100 total. These were a high-end crafting reagent used in many endgame weapons and armor. They needed 1 thorium bar, which miners made, and another item called Arcanite crystals, which you rarely got from thorium veins. And, to top it all off, only an alchemist could transmute the bars once a day, and they would also charge a fee for that too. And once again, you needed 100 of these. The last item you needed was something called an Elementium Ingot.
This is so badass.
These were rare drops from the next trade, the Blackwing Lair, which was even harder than the Molten Core.
Slightly.
You needed 1 for each bar, so 10 total. Once again, very expensive and hard to get.
Here's why they're hard to get.
For most players, they would basically have to rely on their guild for supplying most of these materials because it was just too expensive for one person to handle.
So here's what it was, right? Is it all the other pieces, like Elementium ingots, this, you guys might have forgotten this from Vanilla WoW, but you could reset the instance and like re-kill all of the trash, but the goblins are the ones that drop the ingots. I remember this. They would never drop them. They only dropped them the first time, and that was it. So after we do the first week of BWL, I'm thinking we'll probably try to split raid to get all of the ingots that we need. But the odds are, like, that's only if we have Thunderfury bindings by then. Yeah, they only drop it the first time. And even if you reset the instance, I think even if you soft reset too. And no exploit available, well, we'll figure something out, don't worry.
And if that wasn't enough, even smelting these bars was a challenge by itself. To learn the recipe, you had to find a special NPC in the Blackwing Lair raid named the Master Elemental Shaper
You have to mind
Crixix,
control this motherfucker.
who was behind 4 bosses in the raid.
Yep.
You had to have one of your priests mind control him, and if you talked to him, he would teach you how to smelt these enchanted Elementium bars. So, after a lot of work, you had your bindings, your essence, and your bars. Returning these to Demetrian allowed you to summon the fallen prince himself, Thunderfury.
There he is, dude.
So, you of course would want your entire guild present, unless you were into getting one-shotted by elemental lords.
This guy's a joke, man.
You would battle the Windseeker,
He's a joke.
and if you were successful, he would leave behind
He's
his
substantially
weapon,
easier
the
than
orange
Ragnaros.
dormant wind-kissed blade.
Yep.
Using it would start a quest called Rise Thunderfury, where you would force Demetrian to use the materials you provided to infuse the weapon with power, turning it to Thunderfury, the blessed blade of the Windseeker. It had a high DPS with a very fast 1.9 speed, agility, stamina,
the best
some
sword in the game,
resistances, and a nice proc
People
that
still
deals
use
damage
this in
and slows
TVC.
attack speed of targets hit. As I said, it was preferable to give this to rogues for damage and warrior tanks for better tanking. Honestly, probably warrior tanks were the best because it was the perfect tanking weapon throughout all of vanilla, and tanks even used it for a while in the next expansion, the Burning Crusade.
True!
Although as a vanilla rogue,
Big
I
true.
didn't want to admit that back then.
Yeah, neither did Zivia.
So, that's the story of Thunderfury. It's a little more epic than getting a legendary from Blingtron, isn't it? Like I said, one of the most iconic weapons in the game.
This is during Legion.
You'll see it linked in trade chat all the time.
Yeah.
You get a feat of strength if you obtain it, and it had its own card in the
Fuck
TCG,
yeah, dude.
and was re-released as an
Fuck yeah,
artifact model
dude.
for Outlaw Rogues in the Legion expansion. Maybe this is Blizzard saying that it was a rogue weapon after all.
Yeah, I don't
And
know
it
about
was
that.
also part of the Shaman Order Hall questline,
That's some
where you
bullshit.
get Prince Thunderon as a follower. You pick up the blade from the corpse of a nameless adventurer.
Oh, yeah.
You could even find it outside of the game in Diablo 3.
This was really good,
Blizzard's
actually. This weapon
action
was good.
RPG game.
It was super rare, too.
Certainly one of the coolest weapons in the game, even to this date, in
They've
my
corrupted
opinion.
Ashbringer in D3, too.
Certainly worthy of an episode in the Azeroth Arsenal.
Goddamn right. You're goddamn
so, that's about
motherfucking
it
right.
for this one. Let me know if you think I should continue this series. I think it has a lot of potential. There are lots of cool
sure
weapons
does,
and
doesn't it?
even armor in the
You know,
game
now
that
2
have
years later
interesting
that we
stories
watched
behind
every
them,
single one
just like
almost.
Thunderfury. If you have any in particular that you want to see next, throw some suggestions my way. I'm making a big list right now, so I'll be writing down any requests if you guys have any. Anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. Like it if you liked it, and thanks for watching. Peace.
So, okay.
Farewell for now, mortals.
Watch Benediction if you have time.
Today's video. See
You know what
again
I thought we could do
soon.
before we go to you know, go to Maraudon. I thought about, you know, maybe going and doing a you know, maybe like a Gurubashi Arena. Thought maybe do Gurubashi Arena. Got a half hour.